the two things are inevitable. Ukraine is going to win and Russia is going to lose. Ukraine has achieved irreversible momentum. There's nothing that the Russians can do at this point. They don't have the resources or the capability, and their problems are so deep-seated that they cannot reverse the momentum that Ukraine has achieved. Now, that doesn't mean it's time to start planning victory parades, and it's definitely not time for any of us to take our foot off the gas to help keep pressure on Russian forces. But as I look at the comparison, the test of wills and the test of logistics, the advantage goes to Ukraine in every category. Now, still lots of hard fighting. The Russians clearly don't care how many people die, whether it's their own soldiers or Ukrainian civilians. They're trading bodies for time, trying to stretch this out until the point when they think that we, the West, will lose our will to continue supporting Ukraine. But when we think about the history of warfare, it was always about the test of will and the test of logistics. And I don't see any bright spots on the horizon for Russia. I think the Russians made 4 key strategic miscalculations. Number one, they believed that they had force advantage, that their forces would be able to roll over Ukrainian forces. So kind of a mix of overconfidence in their own capabilities and a total lack of respect for Ukrainian capabilities. So that was the first big strategic miscalculation. The second strategic miscalculation goes to everything that you said in your introduction. They thought that they would be able to isolate Ukraine from everybody else, that there's no way that the West would rally, that we would do sanctions, that we would provide so much capability, that we would really react, because we had a pattern of not reacting very strongly in the past. The third strategic miscalculation was they thought that whatever gain they got would be worth any pain that they received. In other words, the destruction of Ukraine as a state, the destruction of the idea of Ukraine as a state, a few more sanctions, something like that wouldn't really matter. And then finally, they thought they would get a twofer, that they would not only destroy Ukraine, but they would break NATO, that NATO would come a part of this. And so because of these 4 miscalculations, they went ahead and launched this big offensive in February. Well, listening to what comes out of Kyiv and then watching what we're all seeing, clearly improved air and missile defense has got to be at the top of the list. Since the Russians have shifted to a deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure, especially the power grid, as well as other civilian targets, we've got to help Ukraine with their ability to protect their people, as well as that infrastructure, from Iranian-provided drones, cruise missiles, all the different things that the Russians are using right now. So that's got to be number one. And it also means, by the way, attacking comprehensively, not just protecting the target, if you will, the apartments, the power grid, but trying to interdict the flow of these weapons wherever they're coming from, and then also going to the source. I would imagine that the administration, as well as Ukrainians and others, are looking for ways to do that. The second capability that they need, of which they need a lot more, are long-range precision fires, things like HIMARS and other type systems that can deliver precision, high explosive at great distance. I really wish the administration would change their policy on ATACMS. I understand why they don't want to encourage or enable Ukraine to attack deep into Russia, even though the Russians are launching strikes from inside Russia and murdering innocent Ukrainian people. At least give the Ukrainians the ability to start hitting targets inside Crimea now. The bases around Sevastopol, the airfields from which they're launching attacks, if they were able to start hitting them now, it would really accelerate their ability to liberate Crimea, which I think is going to happen in the summer anyway, but we could accelerate that if they started hitting them now. At this point, Russia still has range advantage. Imagine 2 boxers. One boxer has about a foot longer arm than the other one, and they're able to punch. And the Ukrainians have to get inside that before they can start hitting back at the source. The third sort of capability, and I think people will have their own opinions on what else should be provided. I'm not against fixed-wing aircraft, tanks, all these kind of things. Certainly in the wintertime, tracked vehicles are going to fare a little bit better than wheeled vehicles, I think, in this part of in the southern part of Ukraine, where the soil, when it gets wet, has a really nasty sort of consistency. Tracks will do better there. But I think something else that we should be leaning into, and this is very tedious, it's not very sexy, but it's extremely important, it's logistics. The maintenance for all these different systems that we have provided to the Ukrainians, many of them have to be taken back to Lithuania or Germany or Poland to be repaired. So if we're not going to change our policy and put our own guys on the ground inside Ukraine to help repair equipment, then maybe there's a commercial solution, a civilian logistics company, for example, that could come in and fill that gap of what the Army we call second and third level maintenance. I think you and the Air Force would have had a similar, something beyond the crew, that higher echelon maintenance. That's missing in Ukraine. And I think to keep them in the fight, we ought to be thinking about that as well. The fact is that the Kremlin has zero credibility. Nobody believes anything that comes out of there. And so, every time they float some sort of, dog ate my homework kind of story, like the Royal Navy was partly responsible for the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea, or that now that the Ukrainians are planning to blow up a dirty bomb, or all these kinds of things. All of these are meant to distract and to cause us to question and start worrying about stuff, when in fact we should be focused entirely on stopping the flow of weapons from Iran to Russia and helping the Ukrainians do everything they can to interdict or continue to degrade the Russian supply system, instead of giving any air to these ridiculous accusations or warnings by Minister Shoigu or Lavrov or any of the other totally discredited senior Russian officials. I think that it's a sign of how desperate they are. I mean, they really are grasping at anything they can to try and cause us to get off course. And so I think listening to what President Zelensky, how he responds to these ridiculous things, I think our president has done a good job of keeping everybody focused on the task at hand.